Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get to the story. In a quiet corner of a small town in Texas, Mark Davis trudged through the cold, rain-soaked streets, his thoughts heavy with the weight of his responsibilities. At 23, he was juggling his final year of law school, a part-time job, and the crushing debts left by his late father. With each step, the world seemed to close in tighter, his dreams slipping further out of reach. The flickering lights of a nearby cafe offered a brief moment of comfort as he approached the entrance, hoping to escape the downpour. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. Mark Davis speaking, he answered, his voice weary. Mr. Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I'd like to meet with you. It's regarding your financial situation. Mark frowned, confused. I'm sorry, who are you? He asked, his mind racing. I know enough about you, she replied smoothly, cutting him off. Let's meet at Brooks Bistro at 7:00 p.m. It's important. The line went silent before he could respond. Mark stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to make of the call. Eleanor Brooks. The name rang a bell, but he couldn't place it. One thing was clear: his situation was dire, and this strange woman seemed to know more than he did. He had nothing to lose, so he agreed. As Mark entered the warm, inviting atmosphere of the bistro, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and pastries filled the air. The sound of low conversation and clinking silverware surrounded him. He spotted a woman sitting at a corner table, her striking silver hair and poised demeanor immediately catching his eye. Her appearance was elegant, polished, and commanding. She looked up as he approached, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. Mark, she greeted, her voice calm and authoritative. Sit down. We have much to discuss. Mark hesitated, his heart racing. He had no idea what he was walking into, but something about her presence made him feel both intrigued and uneasy. Mrs. Brooks, he said, taking a seat across from her. What is this about? She wasted no time. I know about the debts your father left behind. I know you're struggling to make ends meet. And I have a solution, she said, her tone businesslike, yet strangely comforting. Mark's heart sank as she spoke, the weight of his financial troubles bearing down on him more than ever. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers lightly tapping on the table. I'm offering you a proposition, Mark. A way out of your debt, a way to secure your future. All you have to do is marry me. Mark blinked, unable to comprehend what she was saying. Marry you, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, she said firmly. I don't need love, Mark. I need a companion. A man who will stand by my side for the sake of my business and legacy. You're young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider this. Think of it as a business arrangement. Mark sat there, stunned. He didn't know whether to laugh or to feel offended. He had nothing left to lose, but the idea of marrying a woman he didn't know, for nothing more than a business deal, seemed ludicrous. But then again, the money, the chance to finally break free from the crushing weight of his father's debt, was it really such a bad deal? Why me? He asked, still struggling to process her offer. Because I don't need love. I need someone who can keep up with my world, who can manage the responsibilities I have. Someone who doesn't expect anything more than what I'm offering. A contract marriage. Her voice softened, just slightly, as she added, I want someone to share my name, my estate. I need you, Mark. Mark leaned back in his chair, his mind spinning. This wasn't a typical proposal. But then again, his life wasn't typical. With mounting bills and his family's future on the line, he had little room to argue. What could be worse than the situation he was already in? I need time to think, he muttered, his voice thick with hesitation. Eleanor nodded, unfazed. Take all the time you need. But don't take too long, Mark. This offer won't be on the table forever. He stood, unsure of what to say next. The weight of the decision hung over him, and as he left the bistro, the rain continued to pour, mirroring the turmoil inside him. He wasn't sure what he was getting himself into, but one thing was certain: this was a moment that would change everything. Mark stood outside the bistro, the cold rain soaking his coat as he stared blankly at the empty street. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind, "Marry me." Think of it as a business arrangement. He couldn't shake the thought. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but one thing was certain: his financial troubles weren't going away, and he couldn't keep ignoring the weight of his father's debts. The phone in his pocket buzzed, snapping him back to reality. It was a text from his mom, asking if he was still coming home for dinner. He sighed, his heart heavy. Dinner seemed like the last thing he wanted to deal with right now. That night, as Mark sat at the kitchen table, his mother looked at him with concern, her face pale and worn from years of struggling. She had always supported him, even when things seemed impossible, but Mark knew she was getting tired. The constant worry about bills, the mounting pressure, was taking a toll. She looked at him now, waiting for him to speak, but Mark didn't know where to start. "Mom," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I got an offer today, a proposition from a woman named Eleanor Brooks. She wants me to marry her, in a business deal. She'll pay off the debts, take care of everything, but it's not about love. It's just a contract." His mother's eyes widened, her face a mix of disbelief and concern. "Marry her," she repeated, her voice trembling. "Mark, this doesn't sound right. You can't just marry someone like that, not for money, not for anything. What about love, your future? What happens to you if it all falls apart?" Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration building in his chest. "I know, Mom. I know. But right now, what else do I have? I'm stuck. If I don't do this, everything could fall apart. And I don't know what to do anymore." His mother stayed silent for a moment, staring at her hands. She had raised him to believe in love, in real connections, but the truth was, they were running out of options. "Mark, I just want you to be careful," she said finally. "This might seem like the easy way out, but sometimes the easy way isn't always the right way." Mark nodded, his mind racing. He didn't want to hurt his mother, but he couldn't ignore the truth was drowning. He needed a lifeline, and Eleanor's offer was the only one that seemed to make sense. The next morning, Mark found himself back at the bistro, staring at the same elegant table where he had first met Eleanor. His mind was made up. This was his only option. He had no other choice but to accept her offer. When Eleanor arrived, she was as composed as ever, her presence filling the room with a quiet power. She greeted him with a calm smile, though there was something in her eyes and unreadable intensity that made Mark feel both uneasy and intrigued. "I've thought about your offer," Mark said, his voice steady. "And I'm ready to go through with it. I'll marry you, Eleanor. For the sake of getting out of this mess, I'll do it." Eleanor's expression softened, just a little, but her eyes never lost that sharp, calculating edge. "I'm glad to hear that, Mark," she said, her voice warm but firm. "This is the first step towards securing your future. I'll arrange everything. You'll have what you need, and so will I." She paused, studying him. "But remember, this is a partnership. Nothing more." Mark nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief mixed with uncertainty. He wasn't sure what he was getting into, but he knew this was a turning point. As they stood to leave, Eleanor's hand brushed against his, and for just a second, something flickered between them, something that felt almost like a spark, though he quickly dismissed it. Over the next few days, Mark found himself adjusting to his new life, one he never could have imagined. He moved into one of Eleanor's properties, a luxurious apartment that was worlds apart from his old cramped apartment. His mother was still uncertain, but she didn't argue, knowing that he was determined to make this work. As the weeks went by, Eleanor and Mark's arrangement began to take shape. They attended events together, played the role of the perfect couple, but there was always a sense of distance between them. They never shared more than the necessary small talk, and each time Mark looked at her, he wondered if this was really how he wanted his life to be. She had a certain coldness about her, something that kept him at arm's length. Yet, deep down, he knew there was more to her than just the icy exterior. One evening, they attended a gala, and as they made their way through the crowd, Mark felt a shift. There, standing in the middle of the room, was a man who had been watching them from across the floor. He had a look in his eyes, a look that Mark couldn't quite place. But then it clicked. The man was Eleanor's ex-husband. The encounter was brief, but it left Mark with more questions than answers. Why was Eleanor's past still following her around? What did she have to hide? And why did it feel like there was more to her offer than he initially thought? As the night ended, Mark found himself alone in his thoughts, staring out the window of their penthouse. The city lights stretched out before him, a blur of colors and shapes. He wasn't sure where he was headed, but for the first time in a long time, he wondered if he was on the right path. He knew one thing for sure: this marriage, this arrangement, was only the beginning. And somehow, he felt that the truth about Eleanor was still waiting to be uncovered. Mark woke up the next morning to the sound of his phone buzzing on the nightstand. He rubbed his eyes, still trying to shake off the weight of the dreams he had, dreams filled with confusion, guilt, and a deep sense of longing. He looked at the screen, seeing a text from Eleanor: "We need to talk. Meet me at the office at 3 p.m. He sighed, his heart sinking. It had only been a few weeks since their arrangement began, and already, he felt like he was on a roller coaster. He wasn't sure whether to expect another business conversation or something else entirely. The thought of Eleanor, her calm, controlled demeanor, always left him uncertain of what was coming next. The office was located in a towering building downtown, one of many that Eleanor owned. It was sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city skyline. As Mark walked in, he was greeted by Eleanor's assistant, a young woman with sharp eyes who led him into a private office. Eleanor was already seated behind her massive desk, her back straight, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the surface. She looked up as he entered, her face softening just for a moment before returning to its usual, impenetrable expression. "Mark," she said calmly, gesturing for him to sit down. "I wanted to discuss the next steps in our arrangement. We've made a lot of progress so far, but we both need to stay focused. The public is starting to ask questions, and we need to keep our story consistent." Mark nodded, taking a seat across from her. He had grown accustomed to these meetings, where everything was discussed in terms of business, never emotion, never anything personal. It was always about appearances, about maintaining the perfect facade of a couple. But lately, something had shifted in him. He had been feeling restless, confused by the growing tension between them. Despite all the distance between them, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Eleanor than what she was letting on. "I understand," Mark replied, trying to sound as professional as she did. "But what exactly are you expecting from me in all of this? I've done everything you've asked. I've been to the events, met your associates, but what's next?" Eleanor's eyes flickered for just a second. She didn't expect him to push back, at least not so directly. For a moment, the air between them felt thick with unspoken words. She leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. "Next," she said slowly, her voice low, "I need you to take a more active role in our public life. People need to see us together, truly together. I know it's not easy for you, but we need to show that we're committed. This isn't just for my company. It's for both of us. We're in this together now." She paused, her gaze steady, unwavering. "And I need you to trust me. I've made sure your debts are taken care of. But this is bigger than money. This is about securing your future and mine." Mark felt the weight of her words, the seriousness behind them. He had been so focused on the money, the escape from his debts, that he hadn't fully understood what he was getting into. This wasn't just a marriage on paper, it was a commitment. Eleanor wasn't just looking for a companion to fulfill a contract. She needed someone who could stand by her side in public and in private, someone who could handle the pressure that came with being her partner. "I trust you," Mark said, his voice more uncertain than he intended. "I've had no choice but to trust you." He paused, the unease settling deeper. "But I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending." Eleanor studied him closely, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not asking you to pretend, Mark," she replied, her voice softening just slightly. "I'm asking you to be real, to stop running away from what this is. This arrangement is the first step in something bigger. And if you're serious about making this work, you'll need to start showing the world the same thing I see." She stood up, walking over to the window, looking out at the city below. Mark couldn't help but notice how powerful she looked in that moment. It was the first time he had seen her vulnerable, even for just a second. For a brief moment, the room was silent, the only sound the hum of the city far below. Mark looked at Eleanor, her back to him, and he wondered if he truly knew her at all. He thought back to their first meeting, how she had been so certain, so confident. How could someone like her ever be uncertain about anything? But here she was, asking him to take a leap of faith into a world that was as unfamiliar to him as it was to her. "What if I can't do this?" Mark asked quietly. "What if I'm not cut out for all of this? The public life, the expectations." Eleanor turned to face him, her expression softer now. "You're already doing it, Mark. This is your life now. And you can either embrace it or walk away. But if you choose to stay, we'll make this work. Together." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that was hard to ignore. Mark swallowed, his throat tight. He wasn't sure what he was agreeing to, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was at a crossroads. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: his life had already changed. And no matter what happened next, he couldn't turn back now. As he left her office, Mark couldn't help but wonder if Eleanor was more than just a business partner. Was there more to her than the cold, calculating woman he had first met? And as the days passed, he found himself more and more intrigued by the idea of discovering the woman beneath the surface if he could ever truly understand her. Mark stood in front of the large floor-to-ceiling windows of his new penthouse apartment, watching the city lights flicker below. It was a far cry from the cramped apartment he used to call home. The change in scenery was stark, almost overwhelming. He had never imagined he would end up here, living in luxury, surrounded by wealth he had never known. But despite the grandeur of his new surroundings, something didn't feel right. His life had been turned upside down in the last few weeks, and now, as he gazed out at the sparkling skyline, he couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped in a situation he couldn't control. He had agreed to the arrangement, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. Eleanor's offer had given him an out from the crushing debt his father had left behind, but now that he was living in this world, he wasn't sure he belonged. He wasn't sure he even knew who he was anymore. The person he used to be seemed distant, a fading memory of a time before the proposal, before the extravagant dinners, before Eleanor's carefully orchestrated life had become his own. The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts, and he turned to see Eleanor entering the room, her presence as commanding as ever. She had a calm, composed demeanor, but Mark had learned to notice the little things: the way her jaw tightened when she was stressed, the way her eyes flickered with something that didn't quite match her composed exterior. She wasn't the cold, calculated woman he had first assumed, but neither was she completely warm. There was a distance between them, one that neither seemed willing to close. "How are you settling in?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost too smooth. Mark nodded, but the answer was more complicated than he could put into words. "It's fine," he said, his voice lacking the conviction he hoped it would have. "It's just a lot to take in. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do here." He glanced at her, trying to gauge her reaction. Eleanor seemed to pause for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she walked further into the room, taking a seat on one of the plush chairs. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at him with those piercing blue eyes. "You don't have to figure it out all at once, Mark," she said, her tone softening slightly. "This is a partnership. We're in this together. And part of what I need from you is your trust. I understand it's not easy, but the sooner you accept that this is your new reality, the sooner you can start to thrive in it. She paused, then added, this isn't just about business, you know. You can't keep treating it like a transaction. I need you to be present, to step into this role fully. Mark's heart raced as he listened to her. He had heard the words before, partnership, trust, but they sounded different now, more like an ultimatum than an offer. He had agreed to marry her, but he hadn't realized the kind of commitment she was expecting. It wasn't just about playing a role at public events or making appearances, it was about being there, truly being there in a way that went beyond just the business arrangement. He stared at her, his thoughts tangled. Could he really do this? Could he embrace a life that felt so foreign, so out of his control? The idea of truly becoming part of Eleanor's world, of sharing in her power and influence, terrified him. But at the same time, it also intrigued him. There was something about her, the way she carried herself, the way she spoke so confidently, the way she had offered him a way out of his financial ruin that made him want to understand her more. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. I agreed to the marriage because I needed the money, because I needed the debt gone, but now it feels like there's more at stake. And I don't know if I'm cut out for all of this. Eleanor studied him for a moment, her gaze unflinching. For a moment, Mark thought she would push him further, demand more from him. But instead, she surprised him. I don't expect you to be perfect, Mark, she said quietly. But I do expect you to try. And I know that's asking a lot, but I'm asking because I believe in what we can build together. This arrangement, as you call it, is the foundation of something bigger. And we both need to be all in for it to work. She stood up and walked toward him, her steps measured and deliberate. I'm not asking you to change overnight. But I need you to start thinking of us as a team. We're building something here. And I can't do it alone. Her words hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't just about the contract anymore. It was about trust, about becoming something more than just two people with a shared interest. Eleanor was asking him to be part of her life in a way that made him feel both vulnerable and powerful at the same time. It was scary, but it was also tempting. Mark swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He wasn't sure what to do, but one thing was clear: his life had changed, and there was no going back. As Eleanor turned to leave the room, Mark found himself standing there, staring out the window once more. The city lights twinkled below, a reminder that his world was now intertwined with hers in ways he couldn't yet understand. But for the first time since this all began, Mark felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Something real. The following week, Mark found himself attending a charity gala with Eleanor. It was a grand event, held in one of the most lavish hotels in the city. The ballroom was packed with influential figures, business owners, celebrities, and politicians. It was the kind of event Mark had never imagined himself attending, let alone as the date of the elusive Eleanor Brooks. As they entered the ballroom, all eyes seemed to fall on them, and Mark couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Eleanor walked beside him, her posture perfect, her smile polite but reserved, and he followed her, trying his best to appear confident, though every part of him felt like an imposter. As the night went on, Mark found himself engaged in small talk with various people, all of whom seemed to know Eleanor. They asked him questions about his background, about how he and Eleanor had met, and he answered as best as he could, sticking to the script she had laid out for him. But as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were looking at him with judgment, wondering what a man like him was doing with a woman like Eleanor. His insecurities gnawed at him. He wasn't part of their world, and he felt it deeply. Just as Mark was beginning to lose himself in his thoughts, Eleanor's voice broke through, pulling him back to the present. Mark, I need to introduce you to someone, she said, her voice cool and professional. She gestured toward a man standing across the room, a tall figure with dark hair and sharp features. He was surrounded by a group of people, but as soon as he saw Eleanor, he excused himself and walked over to them. This is Thomas, one of my closest business partners, Eleanor introduced him. Mark shook Thomas's hand, trying to appear composed. He could sense the tension in the air, as if Thomas was appraising him, studying him from head to toe. There was something about the way Thomas looked at him that made Mark feel small, like he was being measured and found lacking. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mark," Thomas said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mark nodded, forcing a smile in return, but inside, he was starting to feel more and more out of place. "Mark is a vital part of our team," Eleanor said smoothly, her tone almost too polished. "He's been a great support, and I'm glad to have him by my side." Mark caught her glance, and for the first time, he saw something more than just a business partner in her eyes. There was something softer there, something almost personal. As the night wore on, Eleanor and Thomas slipped into a conversation about an upcoming project, leaving Mark to mingle with the other guests. But no matter how hard he tried to relax, he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. He wasn't sure if he was ever going to be able to fit into this world, no matter how hard he tried. Later in the evening, as they were about to leave, Eleanor turned to Mark with a smile that was warm but fleeting. "You did well tonight," she said, her tone genuine, though still holding a layer of business. "You handled everything exactly as I expected. I'm proud of you." Mark looked at her, his chest tightening. Was she proud of him, or was she just doing what needed to be done to maintain the image they had created? He wasn't sure. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Mark felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The night had been long, filled with forced smiles and strained conversations. But as Eleanor's hand brushed against his arm, he couldn't help but wonder if he was starting to feel something for her. Not just the obligation to play his role, but something deeper. Something that was, perhaps, real. They climbed into the car, the sound of the engine humming to life as the driver pulled away from the hotel. Eleanor sat beside him, silent for a moment before speaking again. "Mark," she began, her voice softer now, "I know this isn't easy for you. I know it's a lot to ask. But I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that this partnership will lead us both to where we need to go. And trust that there's more here than just business." Mark looked at her, the words sinking in. He had agreed to this arrangement out of necessity, but in that moment, he realized that there was more at stake than just the money. There was something real between them, something he wasn't ready to face, but deep down, he knew he had already crossed a line. And there was no going back. The car ride was quiet after that, the only sound the soft hum of the tires on the road. Mark leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. Eleanor's words lingered in his thoughts, and for the first time, he wondered if the partnership they had built was beginning to transform into something neither of them had expected. As the car pulled up to the penthouse, Mark's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what the future held, but he couldn't ignore the growing connection between him and Eleanor. It was complicated, messy, and not what he had signed up for, but it was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next few days passed in a blur for Mark. He had settled into the rhythm of his new life, but the questions that had been lingering in the back of his mind started to grow louder. Eleanor was more than just a business partner now. She had become a constant presence in his life, and as much as he tried to keep his feelings in check, there was no denying the pull he felt toward her. Yet, every time he thought he might finally understand her, she remained as elusive as ever, hiding behind a carefully constructed mask. It was late one evening when Mark received an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it made him answer. "Mark," a voice on the other end said. "It's Thomas. We need to talk. Meet me at the office in an hour." Mark's heart skipped a beat. What could Thomas possibly want? He had barely spoken to the man since the gala, and their brief encounter had left him uneasy. Still, he agreed, knowing there was no way to back out now. The office was quiet when Mark arrived, the usual hum of activity replaced by a heavy silence. Thomas was waiting for him, standing by the large window, looking out over the city. The tension between them was palpable, and Mark couldn't help but wonder what Thomas was planning. "I'm sure you're wondering why I called you here," Thomas began, turning to face him. His expression was serious, not a hint of the smile he had offered at the gala. There's something you need to know about Eleanor, he said, his voice low, as if he were about to reveal a secret. Mark felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What did Thomas know? Was it about their marriage? Was it something about Eleanor that he hadn't yet discovered? Mark swallowed, trying to steady himself. What is it? He asked, his voice more steady than he felt. Eleanor is complicated, Thomas continued, his eyes narrowing slightly. You might think you've got her figured out, but you don't. She's playing a game, and you're just a pawn in it. I'm telling you this because I don't trust her. I never have. And I think you should be careful. Mark stared at Thomas, processing the words. Eleanor, the woman he had come to know as calculating and cold, was playing a game? What game? And why was Thomas so invested in warning him? I don't understand, Mark said slowly. What do you mean? I mean that she's not the person you think she is. She's not looking for a partnership, Mark. She's using you, Thomas said bluntly. And I'm not the only one who sees it. The people around her, her family, her associates, they all know what she's doing. They know she's not interested in a real relationship. She never has been. Mark felt the blood drain from his face. He had suspected Eleanor was hiding something, but he never imagined it was something like this. Was Thomas telling the truth? Was he really just a pawn in Eleanor's game? His mind raced, but before he could ask another question, Thomas held up his hand, signaling that he wasn't finished. I'm not saying she's a bad person, Thomas continued, his voice softening slightly. But she has her own agenda. She's been through a lot, and that's why she's so guarded. But you, he paused, studying Mark closely. You need to decide what you want. If you're really in this for her, then fine. But if you're just going along because you think this is your only way out, then you need to rethink things. Mark's mind was spinning. Everything he had believed about his relationship with Eleanor was suddenly in question. Was he really just a pawn? Or was Thomas, with his own motives, simply trying to drive a wedge between them? As Mark left the office that night, the weight of the conversation sat heavily on his chest. He had trusted Eleanor, or at least he thought he had. But now, he wasn't sure. He wanted to believe that Thomas was wrong, that Eleanor's intentions were pure, but doubt gnawed at him. Was she really playing him for something more? And if so, what did she expect from him? When Mark returned home, Eleanor was waiting for him, as always, poised and composed. She greeted him with a soft smile, but Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. He had seen a side of her at the gala, something almost human, and now, he was beginning to question whether that had been real or just another act. You're home late, Eleanor remarked, glancing up from the papers on the desk. Everything okay? Mark hesitated. He thought about the warning Thomas had given him. He thought about the way Eleanor had seemed to pull away in recent days, her affection more distant than it had been in the beginning. Could it be true? Was this all just a game for her? I'm fine, Mark finally replied, forcing a smile. Just had some work to catch up on. But inside, his mind was racing. He knew he couldn't ignore what Thomas had said. But he also knew that if he confronted Eleanor about it, everything could change. As he sat down beside her, he felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. Did he confront her and risk everything? Or did he stay silent, continuing the facade? The uncertainty was eating at him, and no matter what choice he made, he couldn't deny that he was standing at a crossroads. The path ahead was unclear, and the future he thought he had with Eleanor was now filled with more questions than answers. As the night wore on, Mark found himself unable to sleep. The city lights outside his window flickered, casting shadows on the walls. He knew that whatever he decided next, it would change everything. But for now, he could only wait, the questions still hanging in the air, unanswered. The following days were tense for Mark. His mind was consumed by Thomas's words, and each time he saw Eleanor, the weight of his doubt grew heavier. He had tried to dismiss the warning, telling himself that Thomas was just trying to drive a wedge between them, but deep down, a nagging voice kept reminding him that there was truth in what Thomas had said. He needed answers, but how could he get them without risking everything? It was late one evening when Eleanor asked him to join her for a meeting with some of her business partners. Mark had been avoiding the deeper conversations with her, trying to keep things surface level, but tonight, there was something in her eyes that told him this meeting was different. As they arrived at the office, Eleanor's demeanor shifted. Her usual cool and collected persona was replaced with a subtle anxiety, one that Mark had never seen before. "You don't have to come in if you're not feeling up to it," Eleanor said, glancing at him as they walked toward the elevator. Mark hesitated. He could tell something was off, but what? "I can handle this on my own," she added, her voice almost too calm. Mark shook his head. "I'll come with you," he replied, even though his stomach was in knots. Something was definitely wrong. The elevator ride was silent, the tension between them palpable. He could feel her distance, like an invisible wall had been built between them since their conversation with Thomas. As they stepped into the meeting room, Mark tried to ignore the growing unease in his chest. The room was filled with the usual faces: business partners, associates, but Eleanor seemed more distant than ever. She greeted everyone with her usual smile, but Mark could see the slight tremor in her hand as she placed her papers on the table. He took a seat beside her, trying to gauge her mood, but she avoided his gaze. The meeting started, but Mark's mind wasn't focused on the business discussions. His eyes kept drifting to Eleanor, watching her closely. Something had changed. She was still the same strong, commanding woman he had first met, but now, there was a crack in the facade. He could see the weariness in her eyes, the exhaustion in the way she moved. It was as if all of the pressure that had been building up for weeks had finally caught up to her. After the meeting, as they walked back to the car, Mark couldn't take it any longer. He needed to know the truth. "Eleanor," he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "What's going on? You're not the same. There's something you're not telling me." She stopped walking, her shoulders tensing. For a brief moment, he thought she might walk away or shut him out, but instead, she turned to face him. "I've been trying to protect you, Mark," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I never wanted you to get involved in this mess. But the more you're around, the more I see how much you don't belong here. This everything, this life, these people, theory, all part of something bigger than you can imagine." Her words struck him like a slap in the face. He had always known she was hiding something, but hearing her admit it was a shock. "What are you talking about?" Mark asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and fear. She hesitated before speaking again, her eyes searching his face as if deciding whether to reveal more. "There are forces at play here that you don't understand. People who have their own agendas, who want to control everything. And I got caught up in it. I thought I could handle it, that I could play the game, but now I don't know what to do." She looked away, her gaze distant, almost lost. Mark took a step forward, his heart pounding. "Eleanor, what game? What's going on?" He reached out, gently touching her arm. She flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "I didn't want you to get hurt, Mark," she said, her voice breaking. "I wanted this to be real, but I couldn't let myself believe it. I thought I could keep you safe, but I've been lying to you, to myself. I don't know how to fix this, but I can't keep pretending that nothing's wrong." She turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. Mark stood there, stunned, unsure of what to do. The woman he had been growing closer to, the woman he had begun to care for, was unraveling before him. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Mark stood frozen, his heart heavy with the weight of everything Eleanor had just confessed. Was this really the truth? Was she telling him the full story, or was this just another part of the game she had been playing all along? He didn't know what to believe, but he knew one thing for sure: nothing about this situation was simple anymore. He reached out, taking her hand gently. "Eleanor," he said softly, "I'm here. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. Together." She looked at him, a faint smile flickering on her lips, as if she wasn't sure whether to believe him or not. But in that moment, something shifted. The walls between them began to crumble, and Mark knew that whatever came next, they would have to face it together. Mark stood in the quiet of the night, holding Eleanor's hand as they faced each other. The weight of everything that had been said between them lingered in the air, thick with uncertainty and emotion. She had just revealed a side of herself that he hadn't known existed. The walls she had built around her were cracking, and he was seeing her for who she truly was: vulnerable, scared, and human. It was a side of her he hadn't expected to see, but somehow, it made him feel closer to her than he had ever been. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Eleanor, I need you to tell me everything. I can't keep doing this, not knowing the full picture. Whatever it is, I can handle it. We can handle it. But you need to trust me." His voice was steady, though his heart raced with the fear of what he might learn next. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of doubt. For a moment, the silence between them was deafening. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "There's a lot I haven't told you, Mark," she said softly. "I've been keeping secrets from you, things that I thought I could protect you from. Things that, if you knew, might make you want to leave. But I can't keep pretending that nothing is wrong. You deserve the truth." Her words were heavy, and for the first time, Mark saw the full weight of the burden she had been carrying. Mark tightened his grip on her hand, his heart beating faster. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this. I'm with you, Eleanor." He meant it. He had no idea what she was about to reveal, but in that moment, he knew he had to trust her, just as she had trusted him enough to let her guard down. Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm not who you think I am, Mark. This whole marriage, it wasn't just about saving you from your debts. It wasn't just a business deal. It was about something bigger. Something I've been running from for a long time." She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm tangled in a web of power, money, and family obligations. There are people who have a lot of control over my life, and I've been trying to break free for years. But every time I take a step forward, something pulls me back. The more I try to fight it, the more I get sucked into it." She took a shaky breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth is, Mark, I got into this marriage with you because I thought it would be my escape. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I had someone by my side who wasn't part of this world, I could finally break free. But now I'm afraid that I've dragged you into something darker than I ever intended." She looked up at him, her expression filled with guilt and fear. Mark stood still, trying to process everything she had just said. He had known there were things about her past that she kept hidden, but he never imagined it was this complicated, this dangerous. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. But as he looked at her, he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't walk away. "Not now. Eleanor," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "I don't care about your past. I don't care about what people expect from you or what you've been running from. All I care about is us, and what we can build together. If you need me, I'm here. If you need to fight, I'll fight with you." He reached up to gently lift her chin, meeting her eyes. "We don't have to do this alone anymore. You're not alone, and I won't let you face this by yourself." She blinked back tears, her heart swelling with emotion. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not as a powerful CEO, not as a woman trapped in a world of her own making, but as Eleanor, just Eleanor. The woman standing before Mark, the woman he cared for. The woman he was willing to fight for. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Her hand trembled as she reached up to touch his face, as if making sure he was really there. "I don't deserve this, Mark. I don't deserve you." "You deserve everything, Eleanor," he said quietly, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You deserve love, freedom, and happiness. And I'm going to help you get it. We're going to figure this out, together. I promise." In that moment, the bond between them deepened. The trust they had built, the walls they had both carefully constructed, began to crumble. There was still a long way to go, and many obstacles to face, but for the first time, Mark felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing wasn't going to let her face it alone. As the night settled in, Mark and Eleanor stood together, the weight of their shared moment heavy but comforting. They were no longer just two people caught in a game of survival. They were partners, truly and fully, ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty, but also with a sense of determination. Mark and Eleanor had spent hours really talking about everything. The secrets, the lies, the fears that had kept them both locked in their separate worlds for so long. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, they both felt like they could face it together. Despite the challenges that still loomed over them, there was a new sense of clarity in their lives. Eleanor had finally opened up to Mark in a way she never had before, and it was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying the burden alone. One evening, Eleanor called Mark to meet her at a private location, an upscale rooftop restaurant that overlooked the city. It was one of those rare, quiet moments where they could finally just be themselves. As Mark arrived, he saw her standing by the railing, looking out over the city. She looked serene, but there was something in her eyes, something that told him she was still carrying a piece of the past, something she hadn't fully let go of yet. "You came," she said with a small smile as Mark approached. Her voice was softer, more vulnerable than usual. "I wasn't sure if you would." Mark smiled back, his heart swelling. "I said I would be here, didn't I?" He stepped closer to her, standing by her side. "Besides, I wouldn't miss this for the world." Eleanor looked at him, her gaze filled with appreciation. "I know. And I'm starting to believe that." She paused, taking a deep breath as if trying to gather her thoughts. "There's something I need to tell you. Something that I've been keeping inside, even after everything we've talked about." Mark raised an eyebrow, sensing the gravity of her words. "What is it?" She turned to him, her expression serious but calm. "I've been afraid to fully commit to this, to us, because of my past. The people I've been involved with, the things I've done. It's hard for me to believe that someone like you could really want a future with me. That you could look past all the mess and see me for who I really am. But the truth is, Mark, I want this. I want us. And I'm ready to let go of the past." Mark's heart raced as he listened to her. He had known all along that Eleanor was haunted by her past, but hearing her say it out loud made it all the more real. He stepped forward, taking her hand in his. "Eleanor," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You don't have to carry this burden anymore. I'm not here because of your past, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here because I see you, not the past, not the baggage. And I want to build a future with you." The words hung in the air between them, a promise, a vow. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed his hand tightly. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this, she deserved him. Mark leaned in, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "We've come a long way, Eleanor. And we're going to keep moving forward. Together. No matter what happens." She smiled through her tears, the first real smile he had seen in a long time. "Together," she whispered. "I think I'm finally starting to believe that." As they stood there, overlooking the city, Mark realized that this was just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter, not just for him and Eleanor, but for both of them. They had faced the darkest parts of themselves, confronted their fears, and now, they were ready to face the future together. It wasn't going to be easy, but as long as they had each other, nothing else mattered. The city stretched out before them, the lights twinkling like 1,000 possibilities. And in that moment, Mark knew that whatever came next, he was ready for it. Because this time, he wasn't facing it alone.